We've got a different show for you tonight. Probably not quite as light and airy as the show normally is. You know, we present hard things, but try to laugh quite a bit. Well, this is it's a more direct show. We'll do one of these every single year. This is a Memorial Day show. This is a show about the fallen. And I do want to point something out here. Memorial Day is not Veterans Day. And I understand when people do things on Memorial Day, like they'll thank a veteran and then police officers and then firemen and first responders. I understand you're doing that out of the goodness of your heart if that's something you do. You're not a bad person for doing it. Please stop. Please stop, because that is a day reserved for those who have given their life on behalf of this nation. That's what Memorial Day is for. And they're so special. They are so important to what this country is, to what this country should be. They deserve to have a day that's not watered down at all. Hear me out. Memorial Day is not Veterans Day. It's not Armed Services Day. It's not First Responders Day, Police Officers Day, or Firemen's Day. It is the day where we honor the ones who never got to come home, who never got to enjoy that life as a husband, as a father, wife, mother. It's a day where we honor them, and they deserve to have that day. So I understand it'll be a heavier show today, but I think it's necessary. And understand, when I say I think it's necessary not just for the people who we lost, not even for their families, although both those things are very necessary. I think it's necessary for the next generation to look at who we honor, because a nation will become who a nation reveres. Don't you think we should be revering these people more than the people we revere now? I do. So I actually picked somebody today, one of my heroes throughout history. His name is John Basilone, or John Basilone, depending on who you talk to and just how Italian you are. He is a Marine who won the Medal of Honor and the Navy Cross in his service in the Pacific during World War II. And he is a lion of a man who deserves a place of honor. And so tonight on the show, I know it's a bit unorthodox, I'm going to read for you his Medal of Honor citation. You can hear from me what he did, and then I'm going to read his Navy Cross citation as well. This is not, again, just about him or his family, even though he certainly deserves all the honors we could bestow on him. This is who you're supposed to be. Not the latest pop star or politician or TV pundit. This is the man you're supposed to try to be. This is his Medal of Honor citation. For extraordinary heroism and conspicuous gallantry in action against enemy Japanese forces above and beyond the call of duty while serving with the 1st Battalion, 7th Marines, 1st Marine Division in the Lunga area, Guadalcanal, the Solomon Islands, on the 24th and 25th October 1942. While the enemy was hammering at the Marines' defensive positions, Sergeant Basilone, in charge of 2 sections of heavy machine guns, fought valiantly to check the savage and determined assault. In a fierce frontal attack with the Japanese, blasting his guns with grenades and mortar fire, one of Sergeant Basilone's sections, with its gun crews, was put out of action, leaving only 2 men able to carry on. Moving an extra gun into position, he placed it in action, then, under continual fire, repaired another and personally manned it, gallantly holding his line until replacements arrived. A little later, with ammunition critically low and the supply lines cut off, Sergeant Basilone, at great risk of his life in the face of continued enemy attack, battled his way through hostile lines with urgently needed shells for his gunners, thereby contributing in large measure to the virtual annihilation of a Japanese regiment. His great personal valor and courageous initiative were in keeping with the highest traditions of U.S. naval service. I want to point out something there because you get kind of the boilerplate version. A couple things you may not have read. One, the Japanese were so fierce when they were attacking the lines. They were so determined that the Marines had killed so many of them in front of the line, they had to run out and push over the stacks of Japanese bodies so they could see to shoot the next ones coming. And when Basilone had to take off and go get those shells, he had to kill men with his hands in the dark in Japan. Well, in the Solomon Islands. That is a man right there. But after that, the man was lionized, absolutely lionized, as you can imagine. I mean, that's an American hero. They wanted him to go back, do all these fancy tours, help him raise money for the war. It always aided him that he wasn't over there fighting still. There were still Marines fighting, and this is a man who could have sat back, gotten fat, cake, whiskey, life of luxury, I'll be a national hero, pretty girls. He couldn't do it. He couldn't do it. Instead, he went back. And this is his Navy Cross citation. Gunnery Sergeant Basilone boldly defied the smashing bombardment of heavy caliber fire to work his way around the flank and up to a position directly on top of the blockhouse. And then, attacking with grenades and demolitions, single-handedly destroyed the entire hostile strongpoint and its defending garrison. This is a man who's so special. The HBO, the channel, obviously HBO, did a series really based around him called The Pacific. Whether you're an HBO fan or not, I highly recommend you watch it. And I don't know how old your kids are, or even if you have them. If they're of age to hear some coarse Marine language and to see some ugly things, might be something to sit down and watch with your children. Is it hard? You bet it is. Of course, it's very hard. I think it's worth it for you and I to watch what these men did on our behalf, don't you? These men like John Basilone, that's really what built the United States of America. John Basilone never came home. He died on the island of Iwo Jima, a blackened, it was all this black sand and black volcano rock, a blackened hellhole. And he died on Iwo Jima because after winning a Medal of Honor and living a life of luxury very briefly, he decided he still had a duty to his men. He still had a duty to his nation. I only point him out by name because, one, it's a great story, and two, there are too many for me to name them all. The truth is, we have so many people who have gone and died on behalf of this country. They deserve our honor. They deserve our respect. And I will say this. Memorial Day, I already told you what it's about and what it's not about. Don't think for a second you're not allowed to go have hot dogs and cheeseburgers and swim in pool time and tip back a couple beers because you're supposed to sit around and cry all day. Men like John Basilone and others, I served with these guys. They would want you to do it. They would insist that you go be an American on that day. All I'm asking of you, it's just a request, all I'm asking of you is on that day with your baseball and hot dogs and everything else, take a moment with your children, with the children around you, take a moment and simply explain to them, why is Daddy or Mommy not at work today? Why do we have the day off? Well, here's why. Because this country has produced lions who gave up the entire rest of their existence to go to some really horrible places and fight on our behalf. And that's the only reason why. It's not the politicians. Believe it or not, it's not even the Constitution. It's the people who are willing to throw themselves into the maw and die. That's the reason you and I get to luxuriate in this wonderful place we call America. Do not forget it. So, like I said, we have a great show for you tonight. There are more heroes to list than I could ever list. If I had the ability to do so, I would take the entire show, even though it would take 48 straight hours, and read every single name of every person we've lost. I can't do that. What I can do is read you a couple stories about John Basilone. I can bring on some great guests. We can remember to honor the people we've lost in this country because they deserve it. So again, Memorial Day, it's not Veterans Day. It's not Police Officers Day, Firemen's Day, or First Responders Day. This is a special, sacred day. Let's make sure we hold it up and hold it up high and explain to our loved ones around us what it really means. I doubt any of that made you uncomfortable, but even if it did, I'm right. We got a great show for you starting now. Joining me now, Gretchen Smith with Code of Vets. She is the founder of Code of Vets. And Gretchen, I need you to tell me a story about a Mr. Danny Smiley, if you wouldn't mind, and please take your time.
Thank you, Jesse, for having me on. That's my dad, Sergeant Danny Smiley. He was a combat veteran back in the war in Vietnam. Came back home, a very troubled spirit. His behavior was chaotic, and I believe it was a direct reflection of how he felt on the inside. Dad did reach out for help initially when he had come back home at the VA in Asheville, North Carolina, and they told him that he had something called shell shock, and that basically he needed to suck it up and be a man and never speak of it again. And it just ate away at Dad like cancer. He never was able to find peace or long-term stability with what he had done in the jungle. He had lost some brothers in arms. It just was a horrific time, as we know. War is hell. And we ended up losing Dad back in 2005. One of my last conversations with him, I sat down and it was very raw. I was in tears, so was he. And I just said, look, Dad, I said, what are you doing? We need you. And he looked at me and he had big tears rolling down his face. And he said, Gretchen, I'm tired. They've beat me. They've won. I'm ready to go home. And I have to tell you, Jesse, I've heard those same words from so many veterans since starting Code of Vets to honor my dad. So this is an inspiration. This is a legacy for him. Code of Vets is it's about my dad. I wanted to honor his life, his death, his service, because he mattered. And all of our veterans who commit suicide and who are really struggling out there, they matter. Their journeys need to be told. Their stories need to be shared.
Gretchen, it should be noted, by the way, to everybody, the dude was a Bronze Star recipient, so this guy was the real deal. Gretchen, why are we failing our vets? And this is what I mean by that. The country as a whole, I mean, even many Democrats, obviously not the radical left, but even many Democrats, the country as a whole loves veterans, right? I mean, you walk by one, you automatically, you want to watch movies about them. You walk by one, you want to say thank you. The country as a whole loves veterans. They run out on the field at a baseball game. They're going to get a standing ovation. So why these guys who come back and they're broken physically and or mentally, do they get kind of tossed aside? Do we not want to think about them in that way? Why? I'm missing the disconnect.
There's a huge disconnect, and it's the $1 million question. And I'm out here every day in the weeds with individual veterans every day. So is my partner, Dr. Cindy Walter, walking with them, finding them assistance. And that we put our veterans, we thank them for their service. And yes, we do value our veterans as a nation. But when it comes down to day-to-day, helping them through that transition from military time back into the civilian world and finding their way back to stability, we're dropping the ball. The suicide issue is very complex. You know, there's many life issues that contributes to it. PTSD is part of it, TBI, a poor family support system, not a strong community support network. Our brothers and sisters in arms come back home and they lose that camaraderie. Brotherhood is real. You know that. You've experienced it. I've experienced it. And when you come back and you don't have that and you're trying to find it, you can lose your way. You can take a nosedive very quickly without any kind of support. So I think it's on us as a nation to figure out how do we provide grassroots local community support as these veterans are coming out, of service, especially our combat vets. They really need that. We go into basic training, we're torn down and we're built up to work as a team, to function as a team. But when we leave the military, we separate or retire, we do not get that same type of intense training, and we need that. We need mechanisms put in place for our veterans. And this is something that we should be having a discussion on the national level every single day until we can get these suicide numbers down, Jesse. There's been a surge because of last year with the COVID restrictions and shutdown. So we've got a surge in suicides versus reducing these numbers. So this is something we need to be out here. It's a worthy conversation. It can pull our nation together. It is bipartisan. We all need to rally around our warriors because they're the ones who've served and who've honored our nation and preserved our freedoms.
Gretchen, okay, last year you mentioned the suicides went up. Is that a job loss thing? Is it, descending back into substance abuse thing? Why did our veteran suicides go up last year?
Last year, there's a direct correlation with the COVID restrictions and shutdowns. When you isolate our vets, we had one who was a bartender, and that was his social network. That was his way out, and he loved that interaction. And he ended up killing himself because he was locked into his apartment, basically on lockdown, and was not able to have those relationships that he needed to survive. And that's just one of many, many stories. We have to do better as a nation when we take on a pandemic and decide we're going to go with these extreme measures. It's going to come with extreme consequences, and of course a lot of them lost their jobs and their paychecks, and many of them were living paycheck to paycheck, didn't have the savings in place, and if it did, it was minimal, and they were not able to live on it. So that created a whole new stress level for our veterans that are already triggered by their PTSD and trying to figure out how to live with that. So when you throw in financial turmoil and ruin into the mix, it was just too much for some of them, Jesse. We have a lot of work to do. There's so much recovery we have to be working towards from last year, and we're still feeling that surge of suicide into this year. It's picked up, and we're just a small grassroots org, but we're dealing with a lot of suicide stuff right now, and it's not right. We need as a nation to embrace our warriors, to say we're here. You do not have to walk this path alone. There is help. There is hope. Let us carry the load with you. Let us find you resources that you're comfortable with so that we can get you back to living life, not just barely surviving day to day.
Gretchen, I understand. I mean, the VA is a whole other conversation. Government is what it is, but private organizations, such as, I'm mainly talking about religious institutions, have they stepped up? Are there major religious institutions stepping up and stepping in? In my mind, they should be kind of on the forefront of that kind of thing, bringing these guys in and giving them help. Are they?
No, that's a great point, Jesse, and I completely agree with you. And they are not stepping into the arena to assist veterans. Not that I have seen, and I'm out there in social media world every day, and I've got a good pulse on what's going on, and we're not seeing that. We need our spiritual leaders to be a part of this journey, because you cannot throw money at a suicide issue and expect a reduction in numbers. This is a heart and soul matter. That's how we need to be addressing this. And our country is dropping the ball when it comes to taking care of our warriors when they are in crisis like this. So it's such an important point for us to notate for our listeners, that we all have to get involved, especially our churches, our leaders in the community. We all need to be in interacting with each other and finding solutions in our local communities for our veterans, because they're worth it. We're losing way too many of them.
Gretchen, the individual the individual military branches themselves, Army and Air Force, Navy, and of course the best one, the Marine Corps, are they improving? I remember when I got back from Iraq and we were getting ready to get out. I'm not here to rip on the Marine Corps or anything like that. It was fine. It worked out fine, but it certainly wasn't extensive. The mental health check on it. We'd just gotten back from war, and it was kind of check your eyes, check your ears, attaboy, pat you on the rear end, and out you went. I'm assuming that's gotten better over the years, though.
Not much. Yet, believe it or not, we're not seeing a whole lot of changes in that particular area. Once you transition out, you're pretty much on your own. You have some of your basic classes that we all went through, for our time in services, and we haven't seen any improvement on that. And a lot of those classes that are offered, the curriculum is from years ago. It hasn't been updated. So that's another area of improvement that we could work on, letting our veterans know, hey, you could have a rough road ahead. You're going to feel some things. You're going to go through some things. When you transition, you're going to miss out on your military lifestyle and that brotherhood, on that connection that you only get here. So you got to work on that on the outside and find a little fire team, so to speak. You got to find and build your own little support network in order to survive, because I feel like we find strength in each other, Jesse. That's truly is the answer, is God, but also with us finding those little teams of, in our communities of support to get through those rough times and to find our balance. And we can do that. We can recreate that. We just have to make an effort as a nation. And this, again, we need to be talking talking about this every single day. We are so hyper focused on politics. We're leaving our warriors behind, and the numbers are glaring. It's telling that we're leaving them behind.
Gretchen Smith, everybody. Thank you so much, Gretchen. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Jesse.
All right. We'll be back. Joining me now, one of our favorite guests on this show, former New York Giant, and we're proud of that. Also, he runs the Jack Brewer Foundation, which is one of the great foundations out there. And part of that is investing in our veterans program. Jack, why would you invest in veterans as part of the Jack Brewer Foundation? Explain.
You know, I've been doing prison ministry and working with underserved populations for so long, man. And as I was in the prison, I started noticing dozens and dozens of veterans that I crossed paths with behind bars. And, I started doing my research and I noticed that, we have over 86,000 veterans in our prisons across America. And that just wasn't right to me, man, because you meet these guys who, some of them had gone over and served in the wars and had served in the military. And, they had issues, they had addiction issues, drugs, alcohol abuse and all kind of things. But to lock them up for this long, I just felt it was wrong. And so I started to really try to focus my programming on this population in particular. And so, we went out and we launched a program. We raised some funds from the Connell Foundation, and we were able to start giving small grants to these inmates. We're teaching them about business, about investing, and we're helping them start a bank account once they get out of prison. So it's really been rewarding, but every time I walk into the prison, I go every Friday, man, and I go teach them. Every time I walk into the prison and they stand up to salute me, I get this feeling and I get the chills running down my bones, man, because I know these guys have served our country, yet they're going to stay in prison and I get to go home to my family.
God bless you for it, Jack. Jack, why do you think they struggle? Because, look, a lot of my buddies did. A lot of my buddies still do. I have a friend of mine just got out of state prison in California that I fought in Iraq with. And there's a lot, Jack. There's a lot. About half of them, I think, they kind of go sideways when they get back. You're the one who talks to them in prison. Why do you think that happens?
A lot of them need support that they're not getting. When you have issues and you're facing addiction and those type of things, you need a support system. And, it's really similar to what we see in a lot of our adolescents that are going through issues, whether they're in homes where they're broken or don't have fathers. The guys that I get in contact with, they need that programming, whether it's that faith and character programming, whether it's those behavioral classes to remind them. But most importantly, it goes back to spirituality. If you can get these guys to really dive in to serving God, to serving humanity, and reminding them of the things that they learned when they were serving our country, being your brothers and sisters keepers and really laying your life on the line for your country and for your fellow man. That's what Christ did. And so I always remind these guys that they are the true heroes. And so I think if you put a support system around folks like that, they can overcome some of these addictions. And hey, some people need to go to prison for a while. Some people need to be reminded when they commit certain crimes. So I'm not here saying that everyone needs to be let out of prison, but I do think that our prison system needs to improve itself in the caliber of programming that it's offering to men and women behind bars. I think we waste a lot of time, a lot of money and resources when we have folks in prison that aren't being provided the rehabilitation programming that they need to truly come back and be great members of society.
I don't disagree with you there. Where's our disconnect then, Jack? Where's our failure? Because, look, we're the wealthiest nation on earth. I understand we're $23 trillion in debt, but I don't want to talk about that. But look, the money's there. We have money. We blow on everything under the sun. How did we miss that? Why did we miss that? What happened?
When you look at the prison system, the budgets are massive. I think last year the BOP budget was almost $2 billion. And so when you look at the budget and then you look at and see how much of that budget actually goes into the rehabilitation and the programming within the prison, it's a fraction of it, less than 1%. most of the time. And so you sit back and think, okay, now incarceration is supposed to be there to rehab people, to get people back and change their behavior. If we're not spending money on real programming, what are we doing? And so that's where the issues come, whether it's unions fighting for money, whether it's, the money being spent misappropriately. It's just the money needs to go in the right places. It's the same issues we see in the education industry across America. These public schools that are getting $25,000 per kid per year, yet not producing quality education. The prison systems are no different. It's shameful, but if you go into most state prisons, they do not have sufficient programming. They don't have, the job skill training. They don't have, the trade schools that are offered there. Our programs now are preparing these guys to where when they get out, they're going to be ready for an interview. They're going to understand the general concepts of business. And we're also working with partners to be able to actually go into the prison and start doing job training behind bars. While we're waiting until these guys are getting out of prison, most states are giving them $25 or $50 in a bus ticket to get home. But yet you're not training these same folks when we need a workforce right now across our country. I think we are really missing out on a big population that could help this country remain stronger and stay stronger.
Jack, I'm seeing some military changes right now. I know you're seeing them too under the new administration, and I don't like them, man. It's more than just crazy standard. I expect a college sociology professor to be a nutball who doesn't know about the real world. When I'm seeing ads from the U.S. Army campaigning for more lesbians, I think we don't exactly have our priorities in line here. How did we get so out of whack so fast?
Because we start confusing justice and making that be without righteousness. And when you separate the two, you have the issues that we see right now. You cannot have justice without righteousness. All right. If you're going to take a person that's confused, a person that doesn't know what sex they are, a person that doesn't know what sex that they want to be with or to find as a mate, that person is not necessarily the folks that you want to have in the military. And people can get upset at me for saying it, but that's not the first person I want to be in the bunker next to with my rifle in hand. And so I think we got to look at the mental situation with a lot of our folks. Military or otherwise, no matter what it is, there's certain positions that are not ideal for someone who is, in my opinion, confused on the way that God created them and confused on the way that the Bible teaches us in the creation of man. And so I think we are focusing on the wrong things. We should be focusing on how do we support our military when they're out there fighting for this nation? And then also, how do we better support these guys when they're home? How do we make sure that our heroes, the guys that put their lives on the line, are truly taken care of? And I'm not just talking about with the VA and these other programs, but I'm actually talking about finding these pockets of veterans that are homeless, these veterans that don't have families, and figure out a way to give them that pride for country and make them really be staples in our society again across the board.
Amen. The Jack Brewer Foundation, everybody, go support it. Jack, I can't thank you enough, sir. I appreciate you as always.
Anytime, brother. God bless you, and keep fighting for good and fighting for justice in this country, man. You're doing a great job.
You too, my man. You too. Appreciate you. That's a good dude right there. Man, I've run into a lot of foundations out there just because of what I do. I don't know that I've run into a better one than Jack Brewer Foundation. That's the truth. All right. We'll be back. Well, we only get the best people for you here on I'm Right. And obviously, by best people, I mean Marines. So joining me now is Josh Mandel, United States Marine Corps, I guess former, even though nobody's an ex, also running for Senate in Ohio. Josh, talking about heroes and people who serve this country, because I think it's important that we don't just point out all the scumbags out there. We actually talk about the really good people. Why did you sign up? Why the Marine Corps of all things too? Why didn't you do something easy like the Air Force?
I was inspired by my grandparents. So my grandfather, Joe, he was a Holocaust survivor. He was in the death camps. He was the only one to survive in his family, and he was liberated by Allied troops. My grandmother, Fernanda, she was an Italian Jew that was saved and hidden by courageous Christians during World War II. And then my grandfather, Harold, who was from Cleveland, he was in the U.S. military. And so when I was growing up, they just hammered into me and pounded into me how proud we are to be Americans, and really inspired me to want to pay it back and pay it forward. And they essentially said, like, listen, you got to pay back this debt. It's a debt to the U.S. military, but for the U.S. military, like, you wouldn't be here right now. So that's why I rogered up and joined the United States Marine Corps.
That's awesome. That's all right. You know what? That was a lot to unpack at once. Let's focus on Grandma for a moment.
All right.
Rescued by courageous Christians. Unpack that for me.
I will. So during World War II, there were about 50,000 Jews in Italy, and they went back, multiple generations. So 4 of those 50,000 Jews were my grandma Fernanda, my Aunt Marietta, my Aunt Renata, and my Uncle Mario. And so as the Nazis were rising in Europe, the word got back to this network of courageous Christian families in Italy, what was happening in other countries. And so this network of incredibly courageous Christians got together and said, we're going to save these kids. And there was a family in Torino, Italy, a Christian family who risked their own life to save the life of my grandmother. And if you think, Jesse, about that level of courage, if the Nazis would have knocked on that door, they would have not only killed my grandma Fernanda, they would have killed the Christian family hiding her as well. And so, I believe like that level of courage only comes from one place. It's one's faith. And I believe that, if we had the opportunity to ask that Christian family how they harnessed that type of courage and strength, they would say it was because of their belief in God. And so, that's the second debt I've been trying to repay in my life, is to that network of courageous Christians who, informed by their faith, saved my grandmother. And it's why I've been such a pointy tip of the spear leader and defender of religious liberty and religious expression and religious freedom, and really the Judeo-Christian values on which America was founded and grew strong. And Jesse, if I may just repeat that, the Judeo-Christian values on which America was founded and grew strong, not radical Muslim values, not atheism, but Judeo-Christian values.
You can repeat that as often as you want on my show, Josh. Josh, are we losing it? I mean, I saw over the last year, everyone's seen the statistics, church attendance at record lows. I was just holding out that was a COVID thing, but I've told people 1,000 times on this show, every nation has to have a religion or the nation will fall. The religion is the sun of a nation, and the whole thing revolves around it. And I feel like we are losing ours, but is that being melodramatic?
I don't think it's being melodramatic. So what's going on in this country is the secular left is trying to take God out of everything. They're trying to strip it out of all aspects of our life. They are essentially trying to indoctrinate our kids. They're trying to make our kids hate America and be ashamed for being Americans. And my feeling is we shouldn't be watering down on our Judeo-Christian values. We should be doubling down on those Judeo-Christian values, because what separates the Judeo-Christian ethic from atheism or radical Islam or other beliefs is the acknowledgement and the obligation to fight for good over evil. And there's so much evil going on in our country right now. There's so much evil coming from Washington. We got evil coming from Silicon Valley. We got evil coming from these woke corporations. And we definitely have evil coming from places like China and the Palestinians and the Russians. And so now's not a time for civility. Now's a time to fight. And we need fighters who are going to fight for good over evil. And sometimes it's Republicans who are perpetrating that evil. So we need leaders who've got the guts and the backbone to not only take on the radical left, but also take on the squishy establishment Republicans as well.
We got to get involved in this guy's campaign. Josh, I don't understand why you're running for Senate. You're a successful dude. Who wants to go to Washington, D.C.? Washington, D.C. sucks. I moved there once myself. I moved out in like 10 months. The whole place is a dump.
It's definitely a cesspool. As President Trump said, it's indeed a swamp. And I think he did a fantastic job of starting to drain the swamp. And now I want to go to Washington, follow in his footsteps, and blow up the swamp. And what I think is going on in that swamp is there's this uniparty where the Democrats and the Republicans, they start to look the same and sound the same. And they're more interested in getting invited to the cocktail parties and being liked by the journalists and being liked by the people in high society than they are about standing up for the Constitution and standing up for the people and standing up for the Trump America First agenda. So let me be clear, Jesse, I am not going to Washington to make friends. I'm going to Washington to blow up the system. And then I'm going to come home and live under the budget and the laws I created. That's why I signed the term limits pledge.
That's awesome. Josh, we're coming up on Memorial Day here. This is obviously a heavy day for most people who've served, especially most people who've served and knew someone they lost. Do you have anybody in your family background, anyone in your time in that you lost you'd like to give a shout out to, or anyone else who you've heard a story about who gave his life for this country and you think's worthy of discussion?
Sure. I never met him, but I had a cousin named Abe Mandel who was a Marine and gave his life in Korea defending the United States of America. And he's someone I'd like to recognize. And listen, I'll tell you what I did last year on Memorial Day, and I'll tell you what I'll be doing this year on Memorial Day. I'll be taking my 3 kids, Gideon, who's 5 years old, Judah, who's 6 years old, and Rosie, who's 8 years old. And I take them to the cemetery, and we go and plant flags next to the graves of veterans to honor them, because I'm trying to teach my kids and raise them up to be proud to be Americans and understand that the reason we have this freedom, the reason we can get on a soapbox on the street corner and say anything about the government without fear of what happens to people who do that in China or in Saudi Arabia or all other countries, the reason we can do that in freedom here today in America is because brave men and women who've paid the ultimate sacrifice in previous generations, whether it was in places like Iwo Jima and Normandy and Omaha Beach, or it was in Khe Sanh, or it was in Vietnam, or it was in places like Fallujah and Ramadi. There's so many men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice so we can live free today.
Amen. Josh Mandel, everybody. Josh, plug your website, please, before we let you go.
Yeah, real easy. It's joshmandel.com, JOSHMANDEL.com. Listen, if you're a wallflower and you're part of the Republican establishment and you're looking for civility, I'm probably not your guy. But if you're anti-establishment and you want to stand up for the Constitution and you want a fighter and you want someone who's going to take on the radical left, but also take on the squishy establishment in the Republican Party and going to stand up and advance the Trump America First agenda, I am your guy. And even if you don't live in Ohio, this is a national race. This is about fighting for the soul of the Republican Party. This is about fighting for the soul of the conservative movement, and would love to have you in our team. It's joshmandel.com, JOSHMANDEL.com. And Jesse, as I said earlier, I didn't get to say it on air, so I do want to say it on air. I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. It's great to see another devil dog out there doing big things and standing up and fighting the fight. And just appreciate everything you're doing to stand in the gap and stand up for our country.
Semper Fi, my brother. Appreciate you.
Semper Fi.
How about that? It's the kind of people we need. We'll be back.